Nobody told you this directly, but somewhere along the way, you picked up a belief that smart people are just born that way. That if you're stuck, it's because you lack discipline. That the answer is more motivation, more willpower, more hustle. Here's what nobody says out loud. None of that is the real problem. The real problem is invisible. It's not inside you. It's around you. Think about the last time you had a genuinely new idea, not a variation of something you already believed. A real, unexpected shift in how you saw something. Where were you? Who were you with? What had you been reading, watching, listening to? I'd bet it wasn't during your normal routine. It wasn't in the same room, with the same people, consuming the same content. Something in your environment shifted and your thinking shifted with it. That's not a coincidence. That's a system working exactly as designed. Your brain doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's constantly taking signals from everything around it. The conversations you're in, the problems people around you treat as normal, the ambitions your social circle considers realistic, the content that fills your idle moments, all of it is data. And your brain is running that data through a filter, building a model of what's possible, what's normal, what's worth trying. You don't notice it happening. That's the point. The most powerful programming is the kind you never see loading. Here's the question that should bother you a little. If your environment was designed not by accident, but by someone who wanted to keep you exactly where you are right now, what would it look like? Would it look very different from what you have today? Is less than #0. 25 hash is greater than... I'm not saying someone is out to get you. I'm saying the default environment most people live in was never designed to produce extraordinary thinking. It was designed for comfort, for familiarity, for staying inside a certain range. And the scary part isn't that the ceiling exists. The scary part is that after long enough, you stop seeing it as a ceiling. You start calling it reality. There's a reason some people seem to keep compounding in ideas and decisions and outcomes, and it's not because they were born with better hardware. It's because at some point, they made a different choice about what environment they would allow to run in the background of their life. We're going to look at exactly how they did that, and more importantly, what it means for where you are right now. Let's start with Benjamin Franklin. Most people know him as a founding father, or the guy on the $100 bill. But here's the part that actually matters. Franklin grew up in Boston, the 14th child in a family of 17. His father wanted him to make candles. That was the plan. That was the ceiling the environment had already built for him. At 17, Franklin made a quiet decision. He left. Not dramatically. Not in protest. He just understood something most people never do. That the environment he was born into was already writing his future, and he didn't want that future. So he moved to Philadelphia. Started over with almost nothing. But here's what he did that most people miss. He didn't just move locations. He rebuilt his entire intellectual environment from scratch. He created a weekly discussion group called the Junto, a small circle of tradesmen, thinkers, and curious people who met every Friday to debate ideas, share books, challenge each other. He engineered the room he wanted to think inside. And the thinking that came out of that room? Electricity, diplomacy, institutions that still exist today. The location changed, but what really changed was the input. Now look at Marie Curie. She grew up in Warsaw at a time when Poland was under Russian rule. Women weren't allowed to attend university. The environment wasn't just limiting, it was designed to make her invisible. But Curie didn't wait for the environment to change. She and her sister made a pact. One would work to support the other's education abroad. Then, they'd switch. Curie moved to Paris, enrolled in the Sorbonne, became the first woman to earn a physics degree there. Then, a doctorate. Then, 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. What changed first wasn't her ability. It was her zip code. Her talent existed in Warsaw. But the environment in Warsaw had no mechanism to develop it. Same person, different environment, completely different outcome. Now here's someone most people haven't heard of. John Boyd. Fighter pilot, military strategist, one of the most original thinkers the US Air Force ever produced. Boyd noticed something dangerous early in his career. The institution around him, the environment of military bureaucracy, was systematically rewarding conformity and punishing original thought. It wasn't malicious, it was just how the system worked. Boyd made a choice. He stopped waiting for permission from the environment around him. He built his own intellectual world read across biology, physics, philosophy, history, fields that had nothing to do with flying planes. And out of that self-constructed environment came the OODA loop, a decision-making framework that is still used today in military strategy, business, and competitive sports. He didn't get a better environment handed to him. He built one inside the one he was stuck in. And then there's Charlie Munger. Munger is famous for his mental models, but most people focus on the models themselves. The latticework of ideas he built across psychology, economics, biology, history. They miss the more important question. How did someone build that? The answer isn't discipline. It isn't genius. It's curation. Munger was obsessive about what he allowed into his mental environment, what he read, who he spent serious time with, what problems he let live in his head. He treated his intellectual environment the way a serious investor treats a portfolio. Every input had to earn its place. Most content didn't make the cut. He once said that he had no use for people who couldn't change their mind when the evidence changed. He wasn't just describing a personality trait. He was describing an environmental standard. He had built a world around himself where that kind of thinking was the baseline, not the exception. You've probably already guessed it. Every single one of these people did the same thing. Before they changed what they could do, they changed where they were doing it. Before the output changed, the input changed. The environment came first. So here's the thing. Most self-improvement content gets completely backwards. It tells you to change your habits, change your mindset, change your morning routine. And maybe those things help at the margin, but they're all downstream of something more fundamental. You've probably already guessed it. Your environment doesn't just influence your behavior. It defines the boundaries of what you believe is possible. That's the real mechanism. Not motivation, not discipline. Belief about what's within reach. And that belief isn't formed by what you tell yourself in the mirror. It's formed by what you see around you every single day. The problems your friends treat as unsolvable. The income level your social circle considers doing well. The ambitions that get quiet laughs at the dinner table. All of it is quietly building a map inside your head. A map of what's realistic. And here's the brutal part. You navigate by that map. Even when you think you're being bold. Even when you think you're dreaming big. You're still operating inside a coordinate system that your environment installed. David Epstein spent years researching this. His book Range looked at how people develop across different fields, why some people reach the top of a single domain, and why others develop a kind of thinking that crosses boundaries. What he found wasn't about talent. It wasn't about hours of practice. It was about exposure to varied environments. People who moved across different contexts, different fields, different cultures, different problem types, didn't just learn more things. They developed a fundamentally different cognitive architecture. They could see patterns that specialists couldn't see. They could transfer solutions from one domain to another. They had a wider map, not because they were smarter, because their environment had shown them more territory. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine two fish. One fish lives in a small tank, fed the same food, same temperature, same light cycle, every day. The other fish lives in a river. Unpredictable currents, different food sources, seasonal changes, new problems to solve constantly. After a year, which fish has developed more capability? You already know the answer. Now, the uncomfortable question. Which environment does your daily life look like right now? Not which one you prefer. Not which one feels better. Which one actually describes where your mind spends most of its time? Most people, if they're honest, live in the tank. Same inputs, same conversations, same content, same rough model of what's possible. And the tank isn't painful. That's what makes it dangerous. The tank is comfortable. The tank is familiar. The tank feels like stability. But what it's actually doing is running the same program on your thinking. Every single day, confirming the same ceiling, refreshing the same map, and the longer you stay, the more that ceiling starts to feel like the sky. This isn't about geography. You don't have to move to a new city, like Franklin did. You don't have to emigrate like Curie. The environment that's programming your ceiling right now isn't just physical. It's who you talk to about ideas. It's what you read when nobody is watching. It's the problems you allow to live in your head rent-free. It's the standard you hold yourself to when there's no external pressure. That's the environment that matters most. And right now, for most people reading this, that environment is running on its factory default settings. Nobody chose it deliberately. It just accumulated, one comfortable choice at a time. Let me make this specific, not historical, not abstract, about you, right now. Think about the last 30 days. Who are the 5 people you've had the most real conversations with? Not small talk, not logistics. Real conversations about ideas, about problems, about what's possible. Write them down in your head right now. Now ask yourself honestly, do those 5 people challenge the way you think? Or do they mostly confirm what you already believe? Because here's what the research actually shows. You don't just absorb the habits of the people around you. You absorb their ceiling, their sense of what's a reasonable ambition, their tolerance for uncertainty, their definition of a good outcome. All of it seeps in, not through pressure, not through advice, just through repeated exposure. Through what gets treated as normal in the conversations you're part of. This is the mechanism nobody talks about. Now think about your content environment, not what you consume intentionally. What fills the in-between moments? The 10 minutes before you sleep, the scroll while waiting in line, the podcast that plays while you cook, that content isn't neutral. Every piece of it is either expanding your map or confirming the one you already have. And most of it, if you're honest, is confirming. Because the algorithm isn't designed to challenge you, it's designed to keep you comfortable enough to stay. Here's the threat that nobody wants to say directly. In the age of AI, the gap between people who think well and people who don't is about to get much, much wider. Not because AI will replace thinking, but because AI will amplify whatever thinking you bring to it. If you bring narrow inputs, a small map, a low ceiling, a limited set of mental models, AI gives you faster access to more of the same. If you bring wide inputs, varied environments, cross-domain exposure, genuine intellectual range, AI becomes a force multiplier on something that was already compounding. The environment you're building right now is not just shaping who you are today, it's determining what you'll be capable of amplifying tomorrow. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Most people who watch content like this, who read books about thinking, who care about ideas, still have an environment running mostly on default. Not because they're lazy. Because upgrading an environment is not the same as consuming content about upgrading an environment. Reading about Munger's mental models is not the same as building a junto like Franklin did. Knowing about Curie's story is not the same as making the move she made. There's a gap between knowing and designing. And most people live in that gap indefinitely. The question isn't whether you understand this concept. You clearly do. You're still here. The question is whether your environment, the actual one, not the aspirational one, is currently designed to produce the kind of thinking you want to have in 5 years. Or whether it's just comfortable enough that you keep telling yourself you'll redesign it later. Later is also an environment, and it has a ceiling too. So, what do you actually do with this? Not in theory. In practice, here's how the people we talked about actually redesign their environments. Not as a dramatic life overhaul, as a series of deliberate, small architectural decisions. The first move is the one most people skip entirely. You have to audit what's actually coming in, not what you intend to consume. What actually enters your mind on a typical Tuesday? Franklin kept a journal not to record his feelings, but to track his own thinking patterns. He wanted to see the inputs that were shaping his outputs. Most people have no idea what's running in the background of their mental environment, because they've never actually looked. So before you change anything, spend 1 week tracking it. Every conversation that shapes your thinking. Every piece of content that gets more than 10 minutes of your attention. Every problem you find yourself returning to. At the end of the week, look at the list. Ask one question. Is this the environment of the person I'm trying to become? If the honest answer is no, then you have a design problem, not a discipline problem. The second move is about where you set your default, not where you push yourself on a good day, where you land on an average day. Most people treat high-quality intellectual environments as a destination, something you visit when you're motivated. A good book when you feel like it. A challenging conversation when the opportunity appears. But Munger didn't treat mental models as something he visited. He made them the default operating system, the standard expectation for how he processed any problem. The goal isn't to occasionally step outside your comfort zone. The goal is to move the address, to make what used to be challenging become your new normal. This happens gradually, but it only happens if you're intentional about where you set the baseline, not just where you occasionally push to. The third move is one David Epstein's research points to directly. Don't swap environments. Stack them. This is a mistake a lot of people make when they decide to upgrade. They abandon everything familiar and jump into something completely new. That's not what Franklin did. He didn't leave his trade to become a philosopher. He added the junto on top of his existing life. He stacked a new intellectual environment onto what was already there. Curie didn't erase her Polish identity and her early scientific curiosity when she moved to Paris. She brought everything she had built and placed it inside a new environment that could develop it further. The compounding happens in the overlap. When your existing knowledge meets a new environment, that's where the unexpected connections form. That's where the range Epstein talks about actually develops. So the question isn't what to replace. The question is what to add and where to add it so that the overlap creates something new. The fourth move is the one Munger understood better than almost anyone. Design friction, not just access. Most advice about environment design focuses on making good things easier to reach. Put the books on the desk. Schedule the good conversations. Join the better room. That's real. That works. But Munger went further. He made the wrong inputs hard to reach. Not impossible, just inconvenient enough to interrupt the automatic behavior. He was ruthless about what problems he allowed to occupy his attention, what people he gave serious time to, what content he let accumulate in his thinking. Because he understood something most people don't. Your environment isn't just what you add to it. It's what you refuse to let in. Every low-quality input you allow is competing for the same cognitive space as the high-quality ones. And attention isn't expandable. It's a fixed resource you're allocating whether you realize it or not. So the design question isn't only, what should I add to my environment? It's equally, what does my environment need me to stop making so easy to access? These 4 moves aren't a program. They're not a 30-day challenge. They're an ongoing architectural practice. The same way Franklin kept rebuilding his intellectual circle as he moved through different phases of life. The same way Boyd kept expanding his reading into new domains decade after decade. The same way Munger is still in his late 90s, treating his mental environment as something worth protecting and upgrading. The ceiling isn't a fixed structure. It's a dynamic one. It moves when the environment moves, which means it can always be raised. But only if you treat the environment as something you design, not something that just happens to you. Here's where most videos end with a list. 10 habits, 5 tips, a challenge for the week. I'm not going to do that, because the real shift here isn't behavioral. It's deeper than that. Every person we looked at in this video, Franklin, Curie, Boyd, Munger, they didn't just change their environment because they wanted better results. They changed it because they had already changed how they saw themselves. Franklin didn't see himself as a candlemaker's apprentice who wanted to do more. He saw himself as someone whose current environment was simply the wrong container. Curie didn't see herself as a woman waiting for permission. She saw herself as a scientist who happened to be in the wrong geography. Boyd didn't see himself as someone trapped in a bureaucratic institution. He saw himself as a strategic thinker who needed to build his own intellectual world. The environment change followed the identity shift, not the other way around. This is why most environment advice doesn't stick. People try to upgrade the environment while keeping the same self-image. They join the better room, but still sit quietly in the corner. They read the harder books, but don't actually change what they believe about what they're capable of. They consume the content about high performance, while privately believing that it applies to other people. People who were born into better circumstances. People with more resources. People who got luckier with timing, and so the new environment just becomes another place, where the old ceiling gets confirmed. So the real question this video is pointing at, the one that actually matters, isn't which environments to change. It's who you think you are inside the environments you're already in. Because if you walk into a room full of people thinking at a higher level, and your internal story is still, I'm just trying to keep up, the room won't save you. But if you walk in with the quiet conviction that you belong there, that your job isn't to impress anyone but to think better, the same room becomes something completely different. Same environment, different ceiling. There's a question I want to leave you with, not as a homework assignment, just as something worth sitting with. If the environment you're currently in, the conversations, the content, the problems, the people, was the only teacher you had access to for the next 5 years, what kind of thinker would it produce? Be honest. Not aspirationally honest. Actually honest. Because that answer tells you more about your trajectory than any goal you've written down. The environment is always teaching. The only question is whether you chose the curriculum. You didn't choose your ceiling. Your environment did. But for the first time, you can.